In this video, I want to talk about the qualified wages for the ERC. But more importantly, I just did a video on the disqualified wages from family members. And I'm not going to do the same video again, but there's a section in there that I think is so important, and that is this rule of greater than 50% owner. Again, greater than 50% owner. And normally in tax law, you look at that through ownership. But today, and this is so important, you have to look at what they call family attributes. Now in that other video, we looked at what was the definition of that. We looked at, it could be brother, sister, son, daughter, mother, father. It could be the ancestors or the descendants. And I'm going to cheat and get that one slide out of that other presentation. But before we do that, realize, and I just want to do this real quick, where we at here is first base, as we know, you have to meet the qualified business test by quarter. If you meet that test, then we go down to second and we determine qualified wages. Well, at second, the big discussion is you can't double dip between PPP and ERC. But what we want to do in the video we just cut, released about the same time as this one, we looked at the disqualified wages because of family members. So we went through, but what we want to do today is once we determine disqualified wages and we pull out the PPP wages, so this is 1, this is 2, and any family leave, I should put family leave in here is 3. Okay. Then we run down here to third base, we do our 940 series, 941s, 941Xs, and 7200, we send it to the IRS, and our home run is the fact we're getting these credits. So again, let me grab another pen. Today, I want to talk about disqualified wages greater than 50% ownership, by example only. So what I did in that other video, if I remember correctly, I had one, I think it was a mother. If not, this will still work. We've got a mother and we've got a son or a daughter, okay? So in that first one, what happens is that the mother owns 100%, okay? It's a sole proprietor. SP, a sole proprietor. So with that being a sole proprietor, the son goes to work for a W-2. Because of the family attribute rules, you look at the son's wages and say, who is son related to? Well, it's a son of the mother, the owner. In that case, the son is now 100%. So the son's wages are disqualified. They're disqualified. They don't get to go from second to third base on the ERC credit. So that was an example of a sole proprietor. Now let's say we have two sisters. We've got a sister and a sister that owns together. So this is a partnership, right? Remember in our attribute rules, I'll tell you what, real quick, let's just look at this. This was from the other presentation. If you haven't seen it, please go and see it. But what we did is we started out with a husband and wife. They had 100% ownership. What we found out is that if it was a child, okay, or a grandchild, or any descendant, then you count all the ownership that they're related to. If it's brothers or sisters, stepbrothers or sister, half brother or sister, a niece, nephew, or an in-law, they all count on either side of the husband and wife. Then we look at ancestral, and it's in this case, we look at the mother and father, but it's the great-grandmother and great-grandfather on both sides. It's mother-in-law, father-in-law, grandpa-in-law, grandma-in-law, step. So you can see, here's what happens. When we go through these next couple of examples, I'm gonna put this back over here. Remember, if you can relate them through the normal relationship, it's my in-law, it's my grandparent, it's my great-grandchild, it's my niece, it's my nephew, it's my half-brother. If you can define a relationship, then you gotta look, first you define those relationships, and then like here with sister and sister, well, on that little family circle that I just looked at with you, a sister is a family member. It's a family attribute. So if sister owns 50% and sister owns 50%, then they both are equal to 100%, not because of their direct ownership, but because of the indirect relationship. So you got to watch this indirect relation. In this case, guess what? Both are disqualified. Now, if I recall in the presentation of the number one mistake, family wages, again, that was, you might want to see that video if you haven't yet. This will help you prepare for it. But in that, the number one mistake, family, wages, let's look at this. Let's say we have 3 cousins. So we'll just pull over here. So mom and dad had 3 children. So I'm gonna work with this, and that is the fact that mom and dad had 3 children. Okay, each one of these children then got married, and they had grandkids. So in this, we're going to have one grandchild from this child, one grandchild from this child, and one grandchild from this child. So we have 3 cousins. So you've got 3 cousins. The important thing, the word cousin is not part of our definition. And again, the number one mistake, the family wages, we go through in depth all the relations. But the word cousin doesn't appear in the family attribute. So in that case, I'm going to take these 3 cousins, all right? And the first thing we're going to say, we're going to make them an S corp. So we got a cousin 1, we got a cousin 2, we got a cousin 3. Notice in my example here, looking back at this paper, I took, mom and dad had 3 children. Those 3 children each had children. So this is a cousin to this is a cousin to this, and they're cousins. So we're looking at 3 cousins. They do not appear in our related family attribute. So at this point in time, if the only employees, for example, were these 3 cousins, they're not related through the family attribute rule. They got a third, and a third. So at that point in time, we're okay. So they start working along, and all of a sudden they go, wait a minute, grandma does really good bookkeeping. She's an accountant. So let's hire grandma. So here is the father and the mother, and they hire grandma. Well, grandma is a parent to the father and mother, but here's the point. Now, child 1 and grandma, all she gets is a W-2. But because of the family attribute rules, cousin 1 is related to grandma, and grandma is related to all 3 cousins. At that point in time, grandma's wages are disqualified, and cousins is disqualified by employing grandma. When you first look at this, you'll think, how can you have more than a 50% owner? If I take a piece of paper and draw it exactly in half, there's a lot of partnership LLCs out there, a lot of corporations out there. I draw it in half, then you're going to argue directly there's no greater than 50%. But if the 2 people have the ownership, are on that related party, they're, any kind of brother, sister, mother, father, grandma, grandpa, great, niece, step, nephew, step brother. Anyway, point of it is, if you can define it, and it appears to be now cousins in that list. So if the cousins don't have any other family members that are related to them, then all their wages qualify. But the minute they hire somebody, then that person has to look and say, wait a minute, now we can go through and say, we've got attributes. So the thing about it, because of grandma's wages are disqualified, and all 3 cousins are disqualified. So, and I know in my example, I used 3 cousins, and I just wanted to come back and explain the difference between direct and indirect. Direct ownership, these 3 cousins own it. But because in their tree, see this tree we did right here, let me get it centered here. This tree we did right here, cousins is not on the related party rules of the IRS Internal Revenue Code. In that case, all 3 cousins, they are not related. But the minute these 3 little X's here, the grandchildren to grandma at that point in time, because then there is a relationship with the owners. Now we have disqualified wages. I know in the other film, I kind of repeated a couple times, and this one I did too, but I can tell you, every time I work on one of these to do a 941 or 941X or 7200, I literally have to go by employee with the small business owner. And the neat thing about it, I've got a column in my spreadsheet that I go relationship. How's that person related? Well, that's my father-in-law. That's my cousin. That's my grandchild. That's my brother-in-law. See, the thing about it, in all those descriptions, the word cousin wasn't in there. And that's why I use that example. So again, what I've done here, I've given you 3 examples on greater than 50%. And greater than 50%, you have to apply the family attribute rules to it. And in this case, for the ERC, the Employee Retention Credit, we have to look at the wages. So when I look at the wages of grandma, when they hired her, before they hired her, everything was cool. But they hired her, and all of a sudden, related parties came into action. She's related to all 3 cousins. You know, these titles are in relationship, are titles that you know without knowing the tax law. So, can't say it enough, greater than 50%, it is defined both direct and indirect by all of these attributes. It goes ancestors up, descendants down, brother and sister across, and nieces and nephews down. Again, that's a great summary on how to determine if the person receiving the wages are qualified or not at second base. We're looking at greater than 50% ownership by both direct or indirect through the employees, the W-2. Thank you. Hope this helps. See you next time. Just touch the button and subscribe. Have a great day.